The FBI ranked Thousand Oaks, California, as one of the safest areas in the nation to reside. It was a utopia in America. However, the Thousand Oaks in Los Angeles County was never the same after April 28, 1997. There was a manager and 3 tellers at Western Financial Bank on Monday at 10:20 a.m. The entrance door was not locked and there was no security guard. Employees weren't separated or protected by plexiglass. 2 armed men burst in, leaving the tellers sitting ducks. They were dressed as construction workers, their faces covered with nylon stockings. To deflect attention from their faces, they were wearing reflective vests. All of the staff members were forced into the rear room in front of the safe by the robbers. The bank employee Monica Leech was given the instruction to open it. That was going to be the last thing she would ever do. After following them to the vault, giving them the money, and complying with all of their requests, one of the 2 guys shot her in the back of the head for an unidentified reason. The only person shot was Monica. There on the floor of the vault chamber, she died from her wounds. Her life was worth a few $1,000s to the robbers. They managed to escape with $9 grand. Local banks and donors quickly amassed $160,000 in rewards for anyone who brought in the suspects following this horrific tragedy. There was security footage, not the best quality, but still usable. Composite sketches were also made possible by witness descriptions. Even after obtaining the getaway vehicle, no one was taken into custody. Sadly, the case was abandoned. In 2021, Monica's spouse Floyd Leech made public remarks regarding the offense. That was 1997, and he was 43. Floyd claimed that people frequently left their doors unlocked in Thousand Oaks. He spent the majority of his life there, where he also met Monica, his second wife. When she left for work that morning, we kissed and said, "See you later." He said, "I walked out the door to go to my job, and she walked out the door to go to her job. I give it a lot of thought. It comes back every time I speak with one of her children. Her kids are now parents." Floyd Leech stated, "I'm still close with all of her family." Floyd and Monica first met in church. It was the first time Floyd had felt content in months, as their love developed exquisitely and organically. "My first wife had passed away from a medical illness 6 months earlier. After that, we began hanging out and eventually got serious about dating. We were married 7 months after we first started dating. My oldest kid stated, 'You're not going to replace my mom,' and Monica responded, 'I'm not trying to,' when we agreed to be married. And not very long afterward, they were really close. She was always close to my second son." Monica played a significant role in supporting both her family and my boys. There were no his and hers between us. It worked out really well, since I adored her kids and she loved mine. Monica spent 20 years working in banking. She moved to Western Financial Bank to be nearer to her family after she married Floyd. Floyd said the following regarding crime: "It wasn't a video game that you could simply restart to restore everything to its original state. She was a true individual. She was a devoted mother who cherished her children and her family. If someone does something bad, I think they should be held accountable. Not the memories, but just a chapter in my life would end if I got those guys." On the other hand, Floyd mentioned that we should put an end to our curiosity about the whereabouts and activities of these folks. For an extended while, detectives believed the 2 individuals belonged to the Crips gang. Dr. Georgia Leap was interviewed to provide more details and shed light on the reasons behind the investigators' belief. She has 40 years of experience working with gangs and is a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles. In the southwest Los Angeles region, the Crips are actually among the oldest gangs. They have deep roots in this place. Paradoxically, they have proliferated globally. I've met Australian members of Crips gang. While their reputation is based on their involvement in gang activities and criminal activity, I believe it's important to note that they have also played a key role in certain important social services. According to Leech, comprehending the Crips entails comprehending an intricate and extensive depiction of street organization that originated in the Southern California region. The factories that were nearby on Alameda Street started to close, which resulted in a sharp decline in employment prospects and income. According to Leech, thousands of people lost their employment when those companies collapsed in the 1970s, and the community never fully recovered. Voters in California approved Prop 13 in that same decade, which was a significant victory for homeowners. While property tax hikes were maintained, it resulted in significant funding reductions for social services, law enforcement, and educational initiatives. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, many people joined gangs in an attempt to make some money. For the most part, the Crips peddled drugs to make money. In most cases, the group earned enough cash to get by. The film Point Break is credited with drastically altering the game, according to Crips member Perry Dido. He claims that the film provided some kids with a guide on how to rob a bank. And suddenly, as if by magic, Southern California rose to prominence as the nation's epicenter for bank robberies. As Ventura County Sheriff's Department Captain Eric Busho pointed out, banks are located almost everywhere in Southern California. Many of them are situated in easily accessible areas, making it simple to exit the highway, drop by, and complete a transaction, especially in the days before ATMs. Banks made security investments because certain of their branches were either less regularly robbed or robbed almost never, while others were frequent targets of robberies that might not have been directly adjacent to a freeway corridor, but a little further out. According to Busho, there was less money spent on security. Southern California became into the Wild West in the 1990s. The FBI estimates that over 2,600 banks were looted during its height in 1992. That's an average of 7 banks every day, and gangs began traveling to locations like Thousand Oaks rather than engaging in conflict in South Los Angeles. According to Busho, their favored means of obtaining cash was carrying out these takeover robberies. The FBI had multiple cases involving members of organized criminal street gangs in Southern California. In 2021, Captain Busho also spoke more about Monica's case in particular. It is rare for something to proceed this far without the appropriate data entering our lab, particularly at the moment of the bigger prize. Several banks banded together and contributed funds to entice people to come forward. After it was retrieved, the car was painted. Those are the bits of evidence we have. Those shackles are ours. We have gathered the proof from within the bank. Busho stated, we just need to get those final few pieces to carry this cross to the goal line. Additionally, in 2021, it appeared that the case might be resolved at last thanks to developments in DNA technology. According to Christina Tokatlian of the Forensic Service Bureau, a forensic scientist and local CODIS administrator for the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, the process of touch DNA involves a person touching an object and transferring some of their cells onto it. Comparatively speaking, these cells contain a lot less DNA than bodily fluids like blood or saliva. Therefore, as technology has developed throughout time, it has become much more sensitive and capable of detecting smaller amounts of DNA. In situations where contact DNA is the only accessible evidence, this has proven to be highly helpful. Authorities declared on March 14, 2023, that 55-year-old Kevin Ray James had been taken into custody in relation to Monica's case. On March 9, 5 days prior, he was taken into custody in San Bernardino, California, and accused of killing Monica. After being transported, James was checked into the Ventura County Jail. James was identified as a gang member during the press conference, and it appears that he was a resident of the Los Angeles region at the time of the crime. Authorities emphasized that the second suspect in the heist has not yet been identified. A $100,000 prize from Crime Stoppers and a $30,000 FBI reward for information on that individual are still in effect. It is requested that anyone with information regarding this case or the second suspect contact the Major Crime Bureau of the Sheriff's Office at 800-5383, 8704 or by email at coldcase@ventura.org. During the press conference, Ventura County District Attorney Eric Nasarenko said the following: "This was a brutal, mindless, and unprovoked crime." He continued by saying that Monica Leech was born into a banking family, raised in the Somos neighborhood in Ventura County, and was a proud graduate of Rio Mesa High School. She was a devoted wife, mother, and daughter who assisted in raising 4 children. She enjoyed needlepoint and morning walks. Dr. Rick Schwartzberg is a chiropractor who worked next to the bank where Monica was employed for 2 months. During that time, she came to know the man well. He said, "At first, I thought it was a typical day since I would frequently go over to my office, which looked out onto the parking lot in between patients. And that's when I noticed someone speeding straight by my office. It wasn't like that. I made a note of it, but I got no response. I then proceeded to see the following patient in the room. At that moment, I received a call telling me to come out right away because one of the tellers had been shot. You know, is there anything you can do to help?" was the sentiment expressed by all. I replied, "Obviously, I can try during the CPR portion." For a little while, it appeared as though things could be getting better, but it became evident very quickly that they weren't. The Barnstable Police Department dispatched officers in response to a probable shooting at a house in the 10 block of Fresh Holds Road in Hyannis on February 27, 2011. The Cape Cod Peninsula in Massachusetts is home to Hyannis. Authorities found the body of 31-year-old Todd Lampley in a bedroom when they arrived at the scene. He appears to have been shot multiple times. Later on, a firearm that was probably used in the crime was discovered in a nearby pond. Unfortunately, the weapon's discovery did not help investigators identify the culprit, and the case was abandoned for a while. Investigators did, however, establish that the crime had numerous of allusions to a show named The Wire. At the crime scene, a phone bearing the name Marlo Stanfield was discovered. A fictional character in the show, by the name of Marlo Stanfield, led Baltimore's most vicious and notorious narcotics ring. Another link to The Wire: Todd was shot while inside his house at night by someone who was standing outside his bedroom window. A fictional woman who is assisting the police is shot in season 1 of the show when the gunman waits for her to approach the window at night, taps the glass to gain her attention, and then shoots lethal rounds into the house. A sweet potato was found at the site of the deadly shooting, according to the authorities. One of the fictitious police detectives in Season 4 of The Wire cracks a case in which the gunman shot his victim to death using a potato as a homemade silencer. The sweet potato was sent for DNA analysis thanks to developments in DNA technology. It was then found to have DeVaris Hampton's DNA. Hampton was wearing a GPS tracker that the court had ordered, which traced his whereabouts at the time of Todd's murder, in addition to the DNA evidence. Hampton was at the Fresh Holes Roadhouse when the crime was likely committed, according to the device's GPS data, and he was subsequently near the pond where the gun was found. Additionally, Hampton and Todd had a prior relationship in court. Hampton had testified that Todd had killed Jacques Sellers in the same neighborhood in July 2007. Due to all of this, DeVaris Hampton, 40, was detained and accused of killing Todd Lampley on February 24, 2023. Hampton entered a not guilty plea when he appeared in Barnstable District Court. His next court appearance is set for April 5, 2023. At a young farmers' gathering in Worcestershire, Brenda Bolton, then 23 years old, met the man who would eventually become her husband. Since they were both from small towns, they clicked right away. Following their initial encounter at Droitwich Winter Gardens, Mr. Venables balanced his visits with her at her home in Rushock, a small village, with his work on his family's pig farm. While transporting goods from the farm to the wholesale market in Birmingham, he would stop by for breakfast on his way home from dawn trips. Following their honeymoon in Jersey, they were married in June 1960 and moved into the Quaking House farm near Kempsey. A year later, the couple moved into their new home, which they had built on land that Mr. Venables' father had given him. Mr. Venables grew pigs there, and the two of them relished the breathtaking view of the surrounding countryside. Their lives appeared straightforward and beautiful to outsiders, but on May 3, 1982, Brenda Venables disappeared. The next day, Mr. Venables reported it to the police. He claimed that their seeding of potatoes the day before had gone exactly as planned. He saw nothing out of the ordinary in his wife's mood that evening, or after they went to bed, and she had appeared to be having fun playing with the puppy on the hearthrug. "When I woke up, she was gone," he told an evening news reporter from Worcester. "I have no idea what has happened to her, and she has never done anything like this before." He added that his wife had been depressed due to a recent sickness episode, and that he had not been able to sleep since she vanished. The search for Mrs. Venables soon brought the community of Kempsey under siege. No sign of her was discovered, despite the West Mercia police using a helicopter to help with the search and tracker dogs looking around abandoned residences and farm buildings. According to the couple's acquaintance, Vicky Jennings, Mr. Venables didn't seem too worried or to be actively looking for his wife. At the time, the Farmers Arms pub on Bestman's Lane in Kempsey was owned by David Harrison, who is currently a councillor on the Malvern Hills District Council. Everyone was shocked to learn that, as he put it, it becomes the talk of the village when someone goes missing. There were a lot of rumours, a lot of things proposed, and a lot of supposition. He claimed that a 2 to 3 week police search encompassed his own 9 acres of land, as well as a 4 to 5 mile radius surrounding Kempsey up to the M50 motorway. Police were everywhere, looking for anything that would help them find her. A large number of them were responding to the hunt. He claimed that in order to check for anything in the ditches, they completely removed all of the flora there. The family of Mrs. Venables was left without a single explanation for what had happened to her for nearly 40 years, up until the discovery of human remains in a septic tank on the grounds of Quaking House Farm in July 2019. The tank needed to be serviced by the farm's new owners, Mr. Venables, who had moved out in 2014. To the horrors of engineer Alistair Pitt, he first discovered a sizable clump of hair, then a human skull. Additionally, thigh and pelvic bones were found. There were additional pieces of clothing in the tank, including a sweater, half a pair of panties, a pair of tights, a bra, and the remains of some shoes, though it was hard to ascertain the cause of death. Only 7 miles distant from the site, searches were being conducted at the time for state agent Susie Lampley, who vanished in London in 1986. Following a search of a Sutton Coldfield property that had belonged to chief suspect John Cannon, new information surfaced, leading authorities to identify a spot near Pershaw. However, they stated that there was no connection between the bones and Miss Lampley. Detectives had to wait more than a year to declare that the bones were officially Mrs. Venables, and her 88-year-old husband was accused of killing her. Prosecutors disclosed throughout his trial that he had been in a long-term, intermittent relationship with his mother's career Lorraine Stiles since approximately 1967, providing insight into the complexities of his secret existence. However, despite the fact that Mrs. Stiles passed away in 2017, the court heard a statement she had made to the authorities in 1984 following Mrs. Venables' disappearance. She said he had called her the day after he had called the police to report his wife missing. Remarkably calm, he abruptly informed me that his wife had vanished the previous evening. She said in her statement that he had called to inform her before I had seen it in the newspaper. About 2 weeks later, he made a few phone calls but said nothing about it. How he was able to remain so composed during the entire ordeal was beyond me. Michael Burrows, the prosecutor, informed the jury that he wanted Mrs. Venables to be out of the way. He desired to carry on with his long-term relationship with another woman. He claimed to be aware of the septic tank's remote position. It was practically the ideal hiding place for him. It was the ideal location for over 40 years, during which he managed to get away with murder. Search team member Peter Sharrock, a police constable from West Mercia, described to the hearing how the septic tank was seemingly disregarded in the early searches. The statement "it just looked like a pad of concrete, and I didn't pay it any attention," was made by him at the time. Mr. Burrows had stated that it was beyond belief that Mrs. Venables took her own life by climbing into the septic tank and somehow shifted the heavy lid and put it back in place above her so that there was no sign of any disturbance. Additionally, he stated that it was preposterous to suppose that Mrs. Venables was approached by someone outside the house when she left their home that evening. During his testimony, Venables expressed his regret for his involvement. In addition, he asserted that his wife and he were still having sex and that they were still sharing a bed up until her disappearance. However, the pair had not shared a bed or slept together since 1968, according to notes Mrs. Venables' consultant psychiatrist, who she was seeing for depression treatment in March 1982, provided the court with evidence. Venables even asserted in police interviews that murderer Fred West might have killed his wife, but juries rejected his denials of involvement and found him guilty of Mrs. Venables' murder. Following his conviction, the Crown Prosecution Service stated that only Mr. Venables and another employee, who claimed it had been challenging to access, had emptied the extremely remote sewage tank in 1982, and that not many others were aware of its existence. Because of this, the Crown Prosecution Service stated that it was an unbelievable case, and that if anyone else had been accountable for Mrs. Venables' death, they would not have been aware that her body had been hidden by a tank. It's possible her body was killed somewhere else and brought back home. Her family claims that they were heartbroken by her disappearance. Her kindness and compassion are deeply missed. They went on to say, "We, her surviving family, are thankful that Brenda was found and that we were able to lay her to rest with her parents in a place of security, calm and dignity." A friend of Mr. Venables' brother, named Marion Walters, stated that the trial ends the decades of suffering. Following a DNA trail that took over 13 years to piece together, investigators apprehended a guy in Virginia who they believed to have fatally shot 2 ladies at their Mount Union home. In their apartment at the Chestnut Terrace housing complex, Christine McWhorter, 22, and her aunt Beatrice Daniels, 31, passed away sometime between around 6 p.m. on January 2, 2009 and 11:50 a.m. on January 3, 2009. According to state police investigations, both women sustained head injuries. Then, Miss McWhorter abandoned her 4-month-old daughter and 4-year-old son in the flat. On the morning of January 3, neighbors learned that the women had been murdered after establishing contact with Miss McWhorter's son. Authorities charged 47-year-old Mauricio Tyrone Johnson of Newport News, Virginia, with 2 charges of criminal homicide in May 2022, after they detained him. By January 2014, when Smith assumed office by appointment after his predecessor George Zanuck was appointed to the position of President Judge of Huntington County, the murder was already a cold case. When Smith was chosen to serve as district attorney in the 2015 election cycle, the case was still pending. Smith clarified that the case has always been worked on. "We are still working cold cases," according to Smith. Furthermore, the Pennsylvania State Police has a cold case team dedicated to victims who need time to get justice, such as Mrs. McWhorter and Mrs. Daniels. The district attorney attributes Johnson's arrest to the dedication of law enforcement and the continuous progress made in technology. Smith said, "We are very satisfied and very thankful for the investigators' determination, and that science and technology have only improved over time." Smith clarified that Johnson wasn't found immediately after the DNA trail was discovered. Rather, every move detectives took in the direction of Johnson, the purported murderer, was a scientific advance. Droplets of blood were taken into evidence from the location on January 3, 2009, according to the criminal complaint filed by Trooper Jonathan Thomas. The preliminary DNA result revealed that blood gathered from the apartment's interior doors and stairs was all deposited by an unidentified male. Rewind to March 14, 2016, when DNA samples were sent by Trooper David Clemens to DNA Solutions. Following that, the samples were prepared and sent to Parabon Nanolabs, located in Reston, Virginia. On May 6, 2016, the Parabon lab released a snapshot report stating that the DNA belonged to a black male with green or hazel eyes, brown to black hair, and a medium to light brown complexion. Trooper Dana Martini asked certified forensic artist and photo case manager Tom Shaw of Parabon Nanolabs to perform a genetic genealogy analysis of the DNA taken from the crime scene on July 12, 2018. On October 9, 2018, 3 months later, Parabon offered a study on the DNA's genetic history and suggested that Moriko Johnson might be a match. Johnson looks like the person described in the snapshot report. Smith said Johnson knew Mrs. McWhorter through his former girlfriend Cynthia Swan, but he would not elaborate on how the various participants in the case are connected. Johnson was first interviewed by Troopers Thomas and Martini on December 12, 2019, at his Newport News residence. Johnson claimed that he used to go to Mount Union to see Swan, with whom he dated from 2001 to 2012. This was reported by the troopers. He denied ever entering Mrs. McWhorter's residence and referred to her as Swan's best friend. Johnson gave the troopers a sample of his DNA using a mouth swab. December 16, 2019. The sample was transferred to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, State Police Lab for analysis. Additionally, the lab stated on January 3, 2020, that Johnson's DNA matched blood evidence discovered on the murder scene's interior doors and stairs. Next, the investigators matched the estimated time of the double murder to Johnson's time card. The New York Department of Corrections, Johnson's former employer, provided time cards to state police on January 22, 2020, confirming that Johnson began his shift at 7 a.m. on January 3, 2009, after being off work on January 2. Estimated by state police, it takes 4 hours and 43 minutes to cover the 294 miles from Mount Union to Johnson's workplace. Johnson's access to a .25 caliber handgun is investigated by the police, the same kind that killed Mrs. Daniels and Mrs. McWhorter. When troopers Thomas and Martini spoke with Carol Broadus Johnson of Connecticut on January 23, 2020, the suspect's half-brother, he revealed to them that he believed their late father had a .25 caliber firearm and that Moriko Johnson had received their father's possessions after his death in 1998. Swan, Johnson's ex-girlfriend, told Thomas and Martini during their interview on February 21, 2020, that she had originally planned to fly to Mount Union with Miss McWhorter on January 1, 2009, and spend the weekend there. However, made the snap decision to stay in Philadelphia with a man named Benjamin June. Swan informed the soldiers Johnson learned that Swan was having an affair with June at this same period. According to the police, Swan texted Mrs. McWhorter last, requesting that she give her a call. It's crucial. McWhorter did not reply to Swan's SMS, according to the police. The father of Mrs. McWhorter's eldest child, Robert Cian Spade, was contacted by Thomas and Martini on July 28, 2020. Spade reported to the troopers that on the evening of January 2, 2009, he spent time with Mrs. McWhorter, Mrs. Daniels, and the kids. According to Spade, the woman maintained the apartment immaculate. He didn't see any bloodstains anywhere in the flat, and Mrs. McWhorter and Miss Daniels were not known for leaving spills or messy apartments. Johnson was the subject of an arrest warrant issued by Magisterial District Justice Lisa Covert's office in May 2022. Newport News Police took him into custody. Smith commended the Pennsylvania State Police, both active and retired, for their unwavering commitment to this investigation. Smith also expressed gratitude to the Newport News Police Department for its assistance in apprehending Johnson, highlighting the efforts of the department's Major Crimes Unit, Homicide Unit, and Fugitive Task Force. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated on our latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.